Exciting matchup as well. We keep talking about the creativity behind the teams in the Oceania region, and this match is no exception. I mean, look at Mitchell's Pokemon. You have the Comfey and the Goodra, Grimmsnarl, Metagross, Rillaboom with access to Gigantamax and Incineroar. There are so many different strategies there and so many great synergies. I'm really excited to see what mode Mitchell's gonna pick, especially against a, I would say, pretty Trick Room leaning team from Chris's side of the field.
Oh, absolutely. And if we look at their accomplishments here between Chris and Mitchell, Mitchell not having as many accomplishments, of course you can add Players Cup for qualifier to that accomplishment list. But for Chris, a lot of regional semifinals all throughout Oceania, with Auckland, regional semifinalists in 2019, Singapore regional semifinalist, Brisbane regionals champion, and Melbourne champion as well. So 2 regional championships under Chris's belt. But when you look at that team with Glacier and Dusclops and Incineroar top of Finny, sure you have some faster Pokemon in Urshifu and Regieleki, but I think your win condition many of the times is that Glacier under Trick Room.
It's just because Glastrier is so good. Chilling Neigh and, Spectrier's ghost-typed counterpart are just fantastic abilities, being able to roll those KOs into attack boosts. It's very similar to the Beast Boost ability that we saw really dominate the metagames back in the Sun and Moon era. This time, the horses get them, so I guess a horse is a little bit different than an Ultra Beast, but still a very scary team to face down. And if you are in Mitchell's shoes, you have to be looking at your team and, asking yourself, what do I have to stop Trick Room? One option that Mitchell could consider is a lot of times when you're running Comfey with a Pokemon like the Goodra that likes to carry a weakness policy, you find a way to get Trick Room onto Comfey so that if your opponent goes for Trick Room, you can just Trick Room, re-reverse the dimensions, and be on your merry way. And I think that's going to be Mitchell's best option going into this matchup, just because if you get Trick Room up, if you get Glastrier on the field, even though Metagross can hit it super effectively, even though Goodra probably has a flamethrower or 2 hidden in its back pocket, that Glastrier is just going to be very happy.
Yeah, I love seeing this fun strategy between Comfey and Goodra on Mitchell's end, because Goodra is it's a fun Pokemon. I feel like a lot of people like it. It's somewhat underrated in that sense, but then if everybody likes it, then it's not underrated. It's a fun design. It's a cute Pokemon. He's a big, lovable dragon, gooey dragon, and it really takes advantage of weakness policy well with Dynamax. Of course, being a mono dragon type, only has those couple of weaknesses with Dragon, Ice, and Fairy, and by self-activating the weakness policy thanks to Comfey's priority, you're able to get a +2 attack or special attack right off the bat. The worry you have is Glastrier on Chris's end. That's an Ice type that Goodra really does not want to face down. So how will Mitchell be able to adjust, understanding that his best option in Goodra is really threatened by Chris's best option in Glastrier?
Well, Mitchell certainly has some options in the form of Grimmsnarl, Fake Out, Intimidate, all those good tools that we've seen do well consistently throughout VGC. So let's go ahead and jump into this game to see what these trainers are going to prioritize as we go into our first turn.
All right, game 1 here down in Oceania. In the top 16, both players are still in winners. This is winners round 1 between Mitchell. Dixon's going to be on the bottom side of your screen. Mitchell has led the Grimmsnarl, Incineroar, and Chris Giagozoglou with Urshifu and Regieleki. That is the Urshifu single strike, which we haven't seen today.
No, and I'm really interested to see how exactly it's going to match up against the Incineroar and the Grimmsnarl, because Urshifu single strike, having that dark and fighting typing, really does not want to be staring down a Grimmsnarl if it has access to Spirit Break, which indeed this Grimmsnarl does. I like the fast start from Chris overall. I think that if you're running a team that has the end game of Trick Room and Glastrier, you send out your fast Pokemon first, stop your opponent's ability to stop Trick Room, and then send those Pokemon in. I'm just curious to see how Chris is going to adjust, or how Mitchell's going to adjust to this lead.
Well, the Urshifu is going to switch out because of the Intimidate. Having its attack lowered is really not a position Urshifu wants to be in. So the Incineroar on Chris's side switches in for his Intimidate of its own. You see that very commonly in VGC. The Fake Out goes into Regieleki, as well as Spirit Break from Grimmsnarl. So an offensive turn one out of Mitchell that will land a critical hit. So he does benefit from being aggressive here, lowering the special attack on Regieleki, which is significant, and also bringing it down pretty low.
It's significant, but unlike some of the other Regieleki we've seen in this tournament, it looks like Chris has decided to bring a more defensive variant, having access to Reflect Light Screen and holding the Light Play item. So yes, those special attack drops are important, but I would argue that Chris isn't looking to deal a lot of damage with this Regieleki. Instead, maybe get up a screen or two so that whenever his Dynamax Pokemon of choice comes out onto the field, it just will be that much more bulky. Another interesting thing to note, we spent a lot of time talking about Trick Room going into team preview for this game, but I don't think Chris has brought Dusclops.
That would be a big deal if he did not bring the Dusclops here, as it's such an effective Pokemon for its team. But Chris, we're gonna have the Reflect out of Regieleki, so Regieleki and Grimmsnarl are kind of able to match each other with their setting up their screens. This Flare Blitz goes into the resisted attack there, and Parting Shot from Mitchell will let Incineroar switch out here, lowering Incineroar's attack and special attack by one stage. But this gives Mitchell some priority here on what he wants to bring in. Looks like he's laboring over the Rillaboom there, which would have a tough time against Incineroar, but then again, so would Metagross, so Mitchell deciding to bring in Rillaboom here.
It's also possible that Mitchell is sending in Rillaboom only to immediately recall it and send that Incineroar back out onto the field. You can stack up those Intimidates quite nicely, especially if you pair that alongside of a Reflect from that Grimmsnarl, and that Fire-type weakness isn't as bad. It's still not great, but it's not going to hurt as much. But I think given how these two trainers are starting out this game, we're in for a little bit of a slow haul. You know, there's a lot of switching, there's a lot of Parting Shots, Intimidates, everything. So it's going to be important to keep an eye on which Pokemon on both sides of the field can deal big damage, and ensure that those trainers are keeping those Pokemon safe as we get the reveal of Chris's last Pokemon in that Tapu Fini.
That is Tapu Fini on the field. Will set up Misty Terrain thanks to its Misty Surge ability. More importantly, that gets rid of the grassy terrain that would be aiding the Rillaboom with additional damage from its grass attacks. That is no longer an option for now. Rillaboom is going to have to switch out if Mitchell wants to reset up the grassy terrain. Electro Web doesn't do a lot of damage, one because it's resisted on Rillaboom, but also because of that Spirit Break earlier, lowering its special attack. You don't really need the damage though, because all you care about is lowering their speeds with Electro Web. That's exactly what Chris did. Grassy Glide is able to take down Regieleki, so Chris is either going to have to bring in the Urshifu again, or the Incineroar for another Intimidate and Fake Out option.
Yeah, we'll have to see which Chris decides to prioritize here. The Incineroar also has the nice option to go for a Flare Blitz into that Rillaboom for big damage, so I doubt we'll be seeing Rillaboom stay out on the field, though, just given how slow these games have started out. But really, the slow pace of the game might work to Tapu Fini's advantage, given that it is one of the Calm Mind variants that we have seen do well really throughout the Sword and Shield VGC series. If you can get enough Calm Minds in, you get your special defense up high enough, you get your special attack up high enough, you can really do some big damage. Fortunately, we have the benefit of knowing that both Rillaboom and really Metagross on Mitchell's side of the field are going to threaten that Tapu Fini eventually. But if this game keeps going as slow as it has been, and if Chris is able to utilize that slow speed to get enough damage down, or maybe even some speed control down on the field somehow, I could definitely see this Tapu Fini powering through despite its weaknesses.
The Rillaboom is going to switch out for Mitchell though, and Mitchell bringing in his Incineroar, so anyone who has watched a lot of VGC with Incineroar being around, you know how these battles go back and forth. You switch in, you Fake Out, you Intimidate, the other guy switches theirs in and intimidates and Fake Out. This is really the process that Incineroar has really become so prevalently known for. The fake out though goes into that slot, so it's not going to matter since it just switched in. Calm Mind from Tapu Fini helping it special defense and special attack, which is a pretty big deal there. Since Spirit Break is a special attack, it will bring it back down to neutral. Is for Chris, the Tapu Fini seems like it could be a potential win condition. Get a couple Calm Mind boosts up, and then do a lot of damage.
It could be, but you have to wonder. Again, we're just talking about time here, so I hope you're ready to settle in for a few turns here, Joe, because it's going to be a bit of a haul, unfortunately.
I got nowhere else to be. There's Pokemon being played. I'm hanging out with my friend Gabby. There's no place I'd rather be.
Oh, well, thank you, Joe. That means a lot. And same here. There's no place I'd rather be than here with you, talking about this game and talking about how we love to see these Incineroars switch in and out as they have been, but not doing this turn.
Yep, no switches out switching from either trainer on this turn. Instead, Chris is going to opt for the Dynamax Tapu Fini, a Pokemon that can take a little bit to set up, but once it gets rolling can be very effective with either Max Starfall or Max Geyser. Chris opting for Max Starfall this turn into the Grimmsnarl, but because of the screens, that is not going to be able to knock it out. And then Parting Shot from Chris's Incineroar, targeting down Mitchell's Incineroar there. So that means Chris is going to have to switch back out here, and this is that revolving door of Pokemon we love talking about.
It is, and it's kind of nice, returning to this style of play. I think it's something that we haven't had the benefit of seeing, at least in our matches throughout these winners round 1 games in the regional finals here in Oceania. But it's comforting, I think that there's a lot of times, especially when you have Dynamax as an option, that you get tempted to go for those big hits. You get tempted to go for the big damage, the choice specs Regielekis, your Urshifu's, your choice banded Tyrannitars even. But in this case, we're just playing some good old slow Pokemon.
Never forget that choice banded Tyranitar. Obviously, it put in no work, but it put in a lot of work in our hearts,
It did.
So that Spirit Break doing essentially negligible damage to Tapu Fini because grassy terrain lets it recover up what it lost, but more importantly, it does get another special attack drop. That's kind of the beauty of Spirit Break. It does not do too much damage since Grimmsnarl isn't usually trained in special attack, but it does always guarantees the special attack drop onto the target. So that's really what it's for.
Yeah, it is, and it's a fantastic move, especially when you have Pokemon like Tapu Fini who are going to be trying to utilize its special attack to its advantage. I mean, again, talking about slow play, talking about bulk, Dynamax is a great way to handle that, but also you're able to hit Pokemon like Urshifu pretty hard as well, and if you're a Grimmsnarl, that's really the best you can hope for. But it looks like we're finally going to be seeing a Dynamax on Mitchell's side of the field, and knowing that it's going to be the Rillaboom, I think we've reached the point where this game is going to start dealing big damage.
And just in the nick of time, Gabby, because I think it was down to maybe half a second where Mitchell finally locked in what Dynamax attack he was going for in that spot. So that was a very close turn there. Urshifu is going to protect on this turn, so it won't take a lot of damage if it is targeted down. The Scary Face will harshly lower Tapu Fini's speed, so making it significantly slower. And here is the Max Knuckle. It is super effective into Urshifu, but that because of the Protect, it's only taking a quarter of the damage it was supposed to.
Yeah, and that's going to be important as we find our way through these next Dynamax turns.
Max Starfall into the Grimmsnarl is super effective, and even without those special attack drops, the Tapu Fini is still able to take down the Grimmsnarl there and reset up the Misty Terrain.
All right, well, 1 down, 3 to go, and having Misty Terrain up is going to be pretty nice because looking at the Rillaboom on Mitchell's side of the field, it doesn't have access to a max overgrowth, which would allow it to reset the terrain. So this Rillaboom is going to be stuck without priority as soon as its Dynamax has been over. As soon as its Dynamax is over, assuming that Mitchell doesn't switch it out. And really, all this Rillaboom needs is one opportunity to go for a super effective hit into the Tapu Fini, preferably after Chris's Dynamax has expired, in order to bring himself into a, I think, advantageous position. The Urshifu is certainly something that you have to be afraid of, but knowing that the Focus Sash has been broken and knowing that you can lay on those Intimidates from your own Incineroar, maybe even throw in a Parting Shot as well, I think is looking like it's in Mitchell's favor.
That's a great point, Gabby, to point out that, to bring up that the Rillaboom cannot reset the terrain. That is one of the trade-offs that I know a lot of trainers go back and forth on. Do you run Gigantamax Rillaboom or do you run just regular Dynamax Rillaboom because you can reset terrain if you max it? But of course, you do have access to your signature Gigantamax attack too. So there's a lot of strategy here, and Mitchell deciding that that signature attack is more important than resetting up the terrain. Will have a Max Knuckle again on this turn into that Incineroar switch in, negating the Intimidate that just happened, and then Mitchell's Incineroar will Parting Shot back out into what will finally reveal his fourth Pokemon because the Grimmsnarl was knocked out.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see the Metagross out on this field now. Metagross is one of those Pokemon that can be very threatening to the Pokemon on Chris's side of the field, and I really want to see it get a couple of really nice hits into that Tapu Fini, especially now that the Dynamax has expired. I would assume that a Gmax Drum Solo, maybe paired with an Iron Head, would be a guaranteed knockout, like easy.
Yeah, and we know that this Metagross has Life Orb, since the Goodra on Mitchell's team, which of course he didn't bring to this match, is holding the weakness policy. Usually in these in Series 9 especially, we're used to Metagross having Dynamite or having weakness policy, but instead there's more upfront damage out of Mitchell's Metagross in this situation. Tapu Fini going to protect because Chris also has that information, so he sees a potential target into that slot. Instead, the third Max Knuckle will go, targeting Incineroar, giving it another attack boost. That's 3 stages of increased attack, and on top of it, knocking out Incineroar. So no more, fake outs and Parting Shots on Chris's end. That's only something Mitchell can do now.
No more Intimidates either, which honestly I think the Intimidate is the move that you have to be afraid of, given that Rillaboom, Incineroar, and I guess Metagross, but Metagross does have access to Clear Body, are afraid of. And I mean, just look at all these stat drops that have come into play in this game. Given how slow things are, that's kind of why these opportunities have happened. But we're down to the final turns. Chris is down to his last 2 Pokemon in that Tapu Fini and the Urshifu, and even though the Urshifu single strike form can hit that Metagross super effectively and deal a lot of damage, possibly even threaten a knockout, knowing that Mitchell still has access to the Intimidate and the Rillaboom as well puts him with the advantage. I think he just has to be very careful on targeting, watch out for those protects, and hope that when you do land your attacks, they connect.
It's a tough turn out of Mitchell. Do you stay in and eat this Wicked Blow from Urshifu? Because that's what it went for. But it targets Rillaboom down with the critical hit instead of the Metagross slot. I think Chris was expecting Incineroar to switch in there potentially, but this superpower is able to knock out Urshifu there. So Mitchell now has a huge 3-1 Pokemon lead, and that is the turn that will potentially decide the game here, as Iron Head is a 2-hit KO into Tapu Fini, and Mitchell is finally going to win this game 1.
And no matter how many Calm Minds Tapu Fini has the opportunity to set up, because Calm Mind is boosting its special defense, unfortunately, that fact of that Iron Head is a 2-hit knockout will not change. I mean, even Rillaboom at this point, if given the opportunity to attack, could most likely pick up the knockout on Tapu Fini as well. Something interesting that we haven't seen on this Tapu Fini yet is the item that it's holding. A lot of times when you're seeing these Tapu Finis who enjoy slow play, who enjoy calm minding, you also see leftovers paired with it. In this case, though, that Tapu Fini was holding a Wiki Berry, which, had that Iron Head done less damage, certainly would have been helpful, but we just did not get to see that activate in this game.
Yep. So congratulations to Mitchell for winning game one. That was a long game. Of course, the light clay boosting up the defenses there. So that was another reason that both of the or both sides were taking like hardly any damage because of the light screen and the reflect setup. But that was just a great call out of Mitchell to say, no, I'm not bringing Incineroar. I've lulled you into this spot thinking Incineroar's a switch in, and no, I'm going to take the game instead.
Yeah, and talk about perseverance on both sides of the field. We saw a lot of switching and a lot of positioning from both trainers early on in that game, but Mitchell just correctly calling when to go on the offense, and I think that is going to be key in games 2 and possibly game 3 as well. You have to be able to match your opponent's slow play, but you also have to look at the field and say, okay, I've managed to somehow switch all these Pokemon around enough times that I can go on the offense now. I can get that critical first or second knockout, maybe stop my opponent's intimidates like we saw Mitchell go for, and then just clean up afterwards. It's a very slow game, and it's really complicated sometimes to follow which trainer's win con is active and which trainer could potentially go on the offense. But both these trainers keeping their cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they adjust going into game 2, because I don't think it's a Pokemon adjustment here. I think you just have to keep your play style going and just outsmart your opponent.
Absolutely. I think the matchup is what it is. So as Mitchell and Chris are getting loaded in for game 2 here, you have to understand that it's, as you were saying, Gabby, this isn't really a Pokemon issue. This is your game plan issue. If both of you decide that Regieleki and Grimmsnarl are important, obviously setting up the light screen and the reflect, then you have to understand it's going to take more to get knockouts because of the light clay boosting how long those turns work out. So in game 2, does Chris have an answer for these long drawn out games?
I will have to see if Chris does. Let's go ahead and jump into game 2 between Chris and Mitchell.
All right, so Mitchell with a 1-0 lead. Again, both trainers are in winners round 1 in the Oceania region. They have made the region finals. The loser of this match is not knocked out. Do not fret. They will just go down to the losers bracket here. So Grimmsnarl and Incineroar is the lead for Mitchell, and for Chris, the Dusclops, a Pokemon that we were really expecting to see in game 1 that didn't show up. Chris making that adjustment. Okay, I need to bring Dusclops here.
I do like how both these trainers led with their light clay holding Pokemon, though, because one key thing that you were touching on as we went into this game 2 is that you have to match your opponent's screens, and this is how you do that.
So fake out Spirit Break into Regieleki, which is, kind of what we saw in game 1. Critical hit from Spirit Break, which is a physical attack that lowers the special attack of the target there, like we saw on Regieleki. That brings it down pretty low. And then Trick Room right off the bat out of Dusclops. Turn 1 here, twisting the dimensions. Those slower Pokemon will now move faster than the fast Pokemon. Regieleki does not like being in Trick Room.
No, but I think we're going to see this Regieleki maybe just kind of bounce its way off the field to come back once Trick Room has expired. Looking at how Tapu Fini fared in the last game, and then looking at that Glastrier that's just sitting on the team sheet for Chris, you have to wonder if one of those Pokemon is lurking in the back of his party. But for now, we're seeing some good old Intimidate shenanigans once again.
You love to see it. Incineroar switching into that Regieleki slot, intimidating both of Mitchell's Pokemon. Has access next turn, the following turn, to fake out there. So not too much damage done from the Dusclops, obviously, but parting shot from Mitchell's Incineroar will be able to switch it out, and now Mitchell has that priority. And this is the back and forth, the Incineroar seesaw that we have available to us in VGC, as now Mitchell gets to bring Metagross in here for free. You would assume Incineroar and Dusclops are both slower than Metagross, though, so it would be attacking last.
It will be attacking last, but unlike a lot of matchups between Dusclops and Metagross, because it is an open team sheet format, we know that Chris has decided not to bring Will-O-Wisp on that Dusclops, which means Metagross can move around a little bit easier in this matchup. I don't think it's quite time for Dynamax per se, but it's certainly an opportunity to get a nice maybe stomping tantrum into that Incineroar slot, or maybe just go for that Dynamax. If you think about it, this Metagross has clear body, doesn't have to worry about any stat drops whatsoever. So even though it's going to be moving fast, it's just going to be dealing that big damage.
Metagross will Dynamax here on this turn. Remember, we are under Trick Room, so those slower Pokemon will be moving first, like a Dusclops or a Grimmsnarl, who has priority, doesn't care what type of room we're in because he has the priority to its reflect there. Nightshade will go into the Metagross, not doing too much damage there, obviously, since it fades off the level. And Max Quake into the Regieleki. It was either Reggie or the Incineroar. Either way, it was going to be a super effective, Max Quake there. So great turn out of Mitchell to raise his special defense and claim a knockout.
And also prevent Chris from accessing Light Screen and Reflect for the remainder of this game. And again, if you think back to game one, the fact that Chris was able to mash Mitchell's screens really came into play. Yes, Incineroar does get back out on the field. Yes, Incineroar didn't take damage from that Max Quake, but I think more importantly, we saw that Grimmsnarl get the Reflect up in the past turn. And regardless of how much damage Incineroar is going to do to that Metagross, thanks to the help of the Reflect, and thanks to the Dynamax as well, that's going to be missing a knockout. So Metagross free to go for another Max Quake into that slot. I don't think you necessarily have to worry about the Dusclops at this point in time. It does have Pain Split and Nightshade, which can certainly be something to be afraid of, but when you have access to Dynamax and Dusclops is at full health anyways, there's only so much those two moves can do together. So if you keep Dusclops at full health, it can't Pain Split, and you can just continue to score those knockouts a lot more comfortably.
Nightshade from Dusclops connecting again on to Metagross there. Spirit Break, though, this is a -2 attack onto Dusclops, so that really does negligible damage there, and of course Dusclops doesn't care about its special attack. Flare Blitz, though, that's one way to get a burn, and that is what happens! That's the only way. No Will-O-Wisp needed because Flare Blitz takes care of it, and that is going to have Metagross attack stat, and that means the Max Quake is not going to pick up the KO on Incineroar. That burn was huge.
The downside to using moves like Reflect that can boost your defense means you are going to be taking more attacks, which means you do have more opportunities for these abilities or these secondary effects of moves to activate. And in this case, Incineroar finding that burn at just the perfect time, also finding it and surviving with enough health to activate that Figgy Berry. So really a tough spot for that Metagross. It just does not like to be burned at all, ever. And if Incineroar found it like it did, that's really disrupts Mitchell's game plan. You can certainly keep Metagross on the field and take advantage of the final turn of Dynamax here, maybe trying to get a defense boost somewhere, or I don't know, trying to get some chip damage down on that Incineroar so that eventually your own Incineroar or maybe that Rillaboom can take it out. But really just a tough spot for Mitchell.
I do understand Metagross's worries, though, Gabby, because I also myself don't like getting burned. It's not a fun sensation. So I can see where it's coming from. As this Max Guard will ignore the Flare Blitz from Incineroar, and then not really much happening that turn. The Twisted Dimensions do return to normal. So if Dusclops wants to set up Trick Room, it is going to have to waste this turn setting it up again. But Incineroar switched in on Mitchell's end, and it can go for a fake out.
Yeah, and the Max Guard there ensured that the Metagross was around when Trick Room did end for that one last attack. Looking at Mitchell's Pokemon and, kind of diving into Mitchell's team sheet, remember, the Comfey was really the only Pokemon that Mitchell had to stop Trick Room. So looking at the board state right now, Mitchell's only hope of stopping the second Trick Room from this Dusclops is going to be an Iron Head Flinch, which can happen, isn't affected by the burn, but is not the consistency that I think Mitchell's hoping for. Got the
Critical
crit,
hit
though.
Ironhead, though. That's what you're playing for at that point. You know, critical hit
Oh!
with the life orb, and he gets the flinch. So a crit through burn into Ironhead flinch is exactly what Mitchell was looking for, and was the worst case scenario for Chris.
Unfortunately, you just have to keep doing that now until Dusclops runs out of health, which I don't think. Yeah, it's going to take a while. So Chris looking like he will be able to get Trick Room up this turn, but without the Incineroar present, that changes things. Incineroar was that Pokemon that was dealing damage to knock out that Metagross, which looks like it will go down to burn damage at this turn.
And parting shot from Incineroar will go onto the Dusclops, letting Mitchell switch back out to reveal his fourth Pokemon, which we can see is the Rillaboom there. Could also go back into Grimmsnarl if Mitchell wanted to, and that's kind of what he's deliberating right now.
I can't blame him. I mean, it's tempting knowing that the Incineroar has been knocked out to go for that Rillaboom, and Rillaboom doesn't have to worry about getting burned either, though I think those Flare Blitz would probably have done a lot more damage to Rillaboom compared to the Metagross. But now's the perfect time to get that Pokemon out on the field. Grassy terrain will mean that you're going to be moving first, regardless of the Trick Room status as well, which is important given that Dusclops was able to set it back up.
Yep, there is the Trick Room. So because of the grassy terrain, that is also going to keep Metagross around for one more turn. The grassy terrain recovery and then the burn damage you take each turn kind of set each other off there. So that was very helpful for Mitchell. Of course, the next time Metagross even gets an attack off, it would just knock itself out from Life Orb. But this Glastrier is probably not even going to let it get the chance here, as Glastrier can, with the Trick Room set up, even though Chris is down to his final two Pokemon, these are the two Pokemon that Chris wants to have in with Trick Room up.
And with Dynamax still available as well. We kept talking about how important Dynamax is to Glastrier, and all of Mitchell's Pokemon have taken some damage in this matchup. You know, the screens are running low. It's been several turns already in this game. Glastrier has the perfect opportunity here to go for those knockouts, get those Chilling Neigh attack boosts, and really, I think, KO every single one of Mitchell's remaining Pokemon.
Rillaboom will protect on this turn, expecting maybe a Max Hailstorm into that slot. Nightshade goes into that protect as well. And then Glastrier with a Max Quake instead, taking down that measly 11 HP that Metagross had remaining. More importantly, it gives the special defense boost, or the more important one is the attack boost that it is going to get thanks to its Chilling Neigh ability.
And by targeting the Metagross there, Chris ensured that Glastrier would be able to take a knockout with Chilling Neigh. If he had gone for Max Hailstorm, I don't think that would have knocked out the Rillaboom through the Protect, but that Metagross had only, 11 HP left? It was a guaranteed knockout regardless if it protected or if it had gone for an attack. So Chris just doing a perfect job, recognizing that the threat of the Intimidate was still there, the threat of the Parting Shot was still there. You got to be taking every single attack boost you can. And now that Rillaboom can't protect, this Glastrier can target that slot safely, either deal some big damage to Rillaboom or deal some big damage to a Grimmsnarl on the switch-in.
Yeah, and of course, because Rillaboom protected the previous turn, now that you have the Chilling Neigh boost and the Rillaboom really doesn't have a good chance of protecting again, only the 30% chance, you can now go for the Max Hailstorm if you wanted into that slot. Incineroar wasn't even in a great spot because you can't fake out Dusclops and you can't fake out a Dynamax Pokemon, so of course the Incineroar on Mitchell's end had to switch. Instead of Max Hailstorm though, the Max Quake is the option for the Glastrier on Chris's end, giving it another special defense booster, but not securing a knockout, so that won't be another Chilling Neigh boost, where now, again, next turn, as Rillaboom goes for the knockoff, will be super effective on Dusclops, getting rid of its EV-Light as well, making it less bulky. Now the Rillaboom can maybe try to protect again, and if you finally target it down with Max Hailstorm, it can potentially live that hit.
It can take that hit, and I think more importantly, go for the attack onto the Glastrier at a moment when it no longer has Dynamax available to it. The thing about Rillaboom is that it does have access to fighting type moves, and looking at Mitchell's team sheet and really looking at his screen as well, we know that this Rillaboom has access to superpower, and the timing of when to use that superpower is going to be key. If Mitchell can get the opportunity to position that Rillaboom opposite the Glastrier, sans Dynamax, sans Trick Room, and get that one, maybe two big hits in, I think that Mitchell is going to be able to take this game. But otherwise, Glastrier is still in a incredibly imposing position, could take another knockout on Grimmsnarl this turn, could potentially knock out a Incineroar on the switch as well, and just get those chilling Nay boosts again and again.
Mitchell letting the clock run all the way down, making that decision on who he wanted to target with Grimmsnarl. Remember, Trick Room is still up for the next couple of turns, so these slow Pokemon on Chris's end are going to be moving first. And the Pain Split from Dusclops actually not helping at all because the Grimmsnarl's health was already so low. But this third and final turn of Dynamax will go for Max Quake all 3 turns, not mattering against these physical attackers, obviously, but that does give him another Chilling Nay boost to negate the Incineroar's Intimidate that just switched in. Maybe that's a new catchphrase we can use.
I was going to say, I kind of want to go to the Name Raider after this and re-nickname my Incineroar that, because it's kind of catchy.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. The key here, again, for this Glastrier is to get those knockouts, and knocking out that Grimmsnarl in the nick of time, as well as we do see the Reflect is no longer active on the field. So no more Dynamax, no more Reflect, no more slow play, really. It is just time to play through this game. There is 1 turn of Trick Room remaining, which means the Dusclops will have the opportunity to Pain Split either the Rillaboom or the Incineroar this turn. And Mitchell has to protect really both of these Pokemon so that next turn he can go for the double attack into the Glastrier to threaten a knockout, or maybe even go for a double attack into Dusclops and prevent Trick Room from being set up. This Glastrier is holding Life Orb and does have access to Protect, so that is something to keep in mind as well. If Chris can find a way to keep Dusclops safe, knock out either the Incineroar or the Rillaboom this turn, and then have Trick Room available to him in this next turn, I think he can take this game and bring us into a game 3. But Mitchell is not out yet.
Grassy Glide is not enough to take out Dusclops, and Dusclops ends the turn healthier than when it started. Looked like it just barely hung on from that Grassy Glide, and now that was disastrous for Mitchell, as Mitchell was able to take that hit actually from Glastrier, living on 8 HP, and the Will-O-Wisp from Incineroar connecting, saying, "You burned my Metagross, now it's time for payback, and I'm gonna have your attack stat too."
Yeah, and the Incineroar holding on with just enough HP as well to get that Will-O-Wisp in. So many Pokemon here just holding on for their dear lives as Trick Room has expired. Chris needs to get Trick Room back up, needs to have this Glastrier go on the offensive. The burn certainly does weaken it, but a couple of Icicle crashes connecting with that Rillaboom will be enough to knock it out. Likewise, Mitchell needs to stop Trick Room, needs to stop the Glastrier. You gotta prioritize the Trick Room user. The big question is, what damage will you take because of that?
And that knockoff will go into Dusclops. Super effective hit. Flare Blitz following up onto the Dusclops, and Dusclops goes down. So now it is that burned Glastrier against 2 Pokemon. High horsepower connecting on to Mitchell's Incineroar. So it is one-on-one. It is Glastrier versus Rillaboom. Remember, as he's getting this Chilling Nay boost to increase his attack, there is no grassy terrain on the field anymore, so there is no boost to those grass attacks from Rillaboom.
Yes, and that is important to keep in mind, but at the same time, this Rillaboom has access to superpower, and as we see Mitchell lock in to protect this turn, you have to know that magic number. How much damage does this Glastrier need to have taken from the burn, from the Life Orb recoil in order for that superpower to knock out? It's sitting at about 60% of its health. The big question is that enough?
Yeah, and if you superpower right here, you lower your attack and defense by 1 stage, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to actually make yourself weaker, which helps out this burn Glastrier there, lowering your defense, and has a couple Chilling Neigh boosts to negate it. So it all comes down to this for Mitchell. Superpower into the Glastrier is super effective. And it looks like Glastrier has just barely held on. What is that? 2 HP? You gotta be kidding me. Icicle Crash onto Rillaboom is a one-hit KO through the burn. And with Chris knocking himself out from the Life Orb recoil, we actually get that game over. Chris wins with no Pokemon left on the field. What a finish.
And with 3 minutes of game time remaining as well. Like, we keep talking about how slow these trainers are playing this game. That's confirmation, but I mean, think about those last few turns, Joe. We saw the Glastrier, you know, just barely hold on to get that attack in. We saw the Incineroars barely hold on. We saw the Dusclops barely hold on. There is so much bulk on the field right now. What a game.
Yeah, there could have been some alternate reality where Dusclops got knocked out before it could Paid Split there, where the Glastrier got knocked out instead. There's so many moments of what could have been, but what we do have here is an exciting Game 3 to send the winner of this match on to Winners Round 2 in the Oceania bracket, and the loser's going to have to go fight it out in the losers bracket.
Yeah, and we saw those adjustments from Chris between games 1 and game 2 to bring that Trick Room mode, and seeing how well it worked out. Yeah, there were a few close calls in there, but seeing how well that worked out to me implies that he is going to be bringing Trick Room once again going into game 3. And if you are Mitchell, how do you stop that? You know, I think that Mitchell played very well, you know, matching the pace of the game and stalling out that Trick Room where needed, but is that going to work in game 3? Do you want to risk that? I really want to see the Goodra adjustment from Mitchell, because I think Goodra is a Pokemon that would succeed, assuming that Chris takes the same strategy we just saw. But at the same time, you know, we've seen so much slow play from these trainers. You have to wonder if they're just going to stick with the matchups they know and just hope that they can outsmart their opponent one last time.
Yeah, so let's get into game 3 here with both of our trainers. This has been such a fun set. Mitchell Dix on the bottom of your screen. We'll actually see Chris on top with Dusclops Regieleki yet again, which is what we saw in game 1, and then Grimmsnarl Incineroar is the lead again for Mitchell here. So between these two trainers, no Goodra adjustment yet, Gabby, but you know, you wonder, does Mitchell kind of start worrying about that Glastrier earlier on this time around? Maybe get a Will-O-Wisp earlier than he did.
I think you have to, but at the same time, how do you time that when you're staring down a Regieleki and a Dusclops? I think that it's great that Mitchell has the opportunity to go for fake out and an attack or set up screens from that Grimmsnarl, but at the same time, none of those things are going to stop Trick Room, and that was really what made Chris's team so hard to power through in that game 2.
Regieleki is going to switch out this time. As you saw in the previous games, if you take out a Fake Out and Spirit Break in that slot, it's a lot of HP that Regieleki doesn't want to lose here, so of course Incineroar switching into that slot for Chris to both intimidate and eat a potential Fake Out. Spirit Break is a neutral hit into the Incineroar, so that does not do too much damage thanks to the Intimidate. And then Incineroar went for Will-O-Wisp, but it went into the Incineroar slot. That's what I was wondering too, Gabby. If Incineroar was expecting Glastrier to switch in on like the freest Trick Room of Dusclops' life there, if you switched in Glastrier, that was a good call that didn't work out for Mitchell, but that was still a really strong move.
It was, and I like how, again, Mitchell is avoiding dealing damage to that Dusclops, knowing how much of a problem Pain Split turned out to be in the previous games. You want to keep Dusclops at full health, especially now that Trick Room is up, to go for those big damage dealing hits once it has expired. So you know, great board management on Mitchell's side of the field. I love the prediction there with that Will-O-Wisp. Yes, nothing really came from it, but at the same time, I think that you're setting yourself up for success, if only by limiting what this Dusclops can do.
A Reflect is set up on Mitchell's end, so that's going to have the physical attacks coming their way for the next 8 turns thanks to the Light Clay, and a Parting Shot from Incineroar will go into Chris's Incineroar there and let it switch out, get some fake out and intimidate positioning later on. Mitchell deciding to bring the Metagross in on this turn.
That makes me nervous, given how we saw that Metagross get burned by the Flare Blitz back in Game 2. If that happens again, that would be scary, but it looks like Incineroar is also leaving, so Metagross bought itself some time.
Yeah, he got lucky there, the Metagross. So he'll have to worry about the 10% chance of burn a little later on in this matchup, because you kind of forget that was so many turns earlier to that fantastic finish that we had, that if it wasn't for that Flare Blitz burn, would have been a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, and I can't help but wonder if Chris is going to try and give himself those opportunities once again. Regieleki isn't really the Pokemon you want on the field under Trick Room, but more importantly, it's not Chris's last Pokemon, and the fact that he's keeping that information hidden, to me, implies that we will be seeing the return of the Incineroar very soon. The big question if you're Mitchell is, do you just go for the Dynamax and go for the Max Quake into that spot and hope you catch that Incineroar on the switch, or maybe pick up an early knockout on that Regieleki, or do you make a couple more switches of your own and you decide, hey, this isn't the time? It looks like Mitchell is going on the offensive with that Dynamax, so we'll have to see how this is going to play out.
It is definitely a tough call, because you sit there Max Quaking the target next to Dusclops, expecting it either to be Regieleki or the Incineroar. Of course there was no switch this turn, but that's what's going through Mitchell's head. Or, excuse me, do you start targeting down the Dusclops, who's been such a nuisance this whole set, just essentially been on the field the entire duration of the set there, and if you target everything else down, then you let the Dusclops stay super important here. So he decides not to target the Dusclops, instead. Spirit Break will hit it, but this Max Quake will go into Regieleki. Obviously super effective, and getting the clean one-hit knockout there. So, Gabby, what do you think, if this Dusclops isn't around to really facilitate Glastrier at all, then if you target it down, then maybe you don't have to worry about Glastrier as much and Trick Room as much?
You don't, but I think it's still too early to target the Dusclops, because any damage you do to it at this point in time is going to be pain split away. I like how Mitchell is going for those small hits against the Dusclops, because you're not going to get much out of a pain split if you go for it when you've taken, what, like 5-6% damage? You'd be better off going for a Nightshade and taking the guaranteed 50 and being done with it. So, but at the same time, this little bit of chip damage is going to add up. We saw the knockoff from the Rillaboom in Game 2 do about 50% of damage to that Dusclops. So hypothetically, you stall out Trick Room, you get that Rillaboom and another attacking Pokemon on the field, 1-2 hit, knockout, no Trick Room, and then that's your win con. So Mitchell playing it very safe, going for that chip where it's needed. We'll just see the results of this in a few more turns.
Incineroar switching into the Glastrier slot. Intimidate obviously not mattering, since Metagross has Clear Body as its ability. Mitchell will switch his Grimmsnarl into Incineroar as well to lower the other side's attack. Nightshade, which is what we saw Chris do the last game, just Nightshade a couple of times to get the Metagross within range, will connect on it. Max Steel Spike is still pretty strong for an ineffective attack into the Incineroar slot there, so that is going to get a defense boost. And I do like this adjustment, because we noted last time, once the Regieleki is gone, everyone else, the Dusclops is always doing 50 HP. The Incineroar and the Glastrier are physical attackers. So yes, the Max Quakes help because they're super effective, but Max Steel Spikes give you those defense boosts that really help you against Incineroar and Glastrier.
And most importantly of all, Mitchell has access to Fake Out, which means Incineroar will not be able to attack this turn. Incineroar will not be able to connect a Flare Blitz with Metagross and not take the chance of that burn. Metagross is free to attack in that slot. Chris can swap out the Incineroar, but then that Glastrier is going to be taking a Max Steel Spike, and let's be real, that's not really a great option either.
Fake Out from Mitchell's Incineroar actually gaining HP on Chris's, because the Fake Out was enough to activate the Figgy Berry. It brought it down low enough to eat its Figgy Berry. Nightshade from Dusclops into Mitchell's Incineroar is going to bring it to about half HP, and a Max Steel Spike from Metagross into Incineroar, not enough to take it out because of the Figgy Berry. So that was actually a giant turn for Chris, because if Fake Out Max Steel Spike without Figgy Berry, that would have been enough, as the Twisted Dimensions do return to normal here in this spot. So now Metagross is going to be faster, but that was something that I think Mitchell might have miscalculated, didn't know that the Fake Out was going to activate his Figgy Berry.
But some more information revealed. We saw the Incineroar on Mitchell's side of the field move first, and it's possible that means the Mitchell's Incineroar will be able to target the opposing Incineroar with an attack, Flare Blitz in this case, for that knockout, prior to Incineroar getting the opportunity to attack itself. Trick Room is still up on the field, and normally you'd assume that you'd run a fairly slow Incineroar to go with the Trick Room, but that just was something interesting to call out there. So pay attention to the speeds on the field. That's certainly going to come into play. Also, whether or not the Flare Blitz connects and whether or not we see that second burn. But Trick Room is up, so looks like we're still going to have the speed going here.
Flare Blitz from Chris's end will go into Metagross, and because of those 2 defense boosts from Max Steel Spikes, that is not going to get the knockout where it would have without it. Flare Blitz is ineffective into the Incineroar, but it does all the damage it needs to. That little bit of chip is all Mitchell needed. And now Dusclops is going to go for Trick Room on this turn. It had just ended the previous turn, so the Iron Head into that slot was similar to the game plan Mitchell had in the previous game, where he was trying to Iron Head flinch it to stop Trick Room. But now Glastrier switches in at full health with a full 4 turns of Trick Room to use here.
And Metagross and Incineroar weakened as well. If Glastrier can find a knockout on one of these 2 Pokemon, get that Chilling Neigh boost without Intimidate in play, it's going to start dealing more and more damage, and again, utilize Trick Room to his advantage. So, it's great that the Metagross has not been burned. That certainly is an improvement over what happened in Game 2 for Mitchell, but still in a tough spot. He needs to find a way to get through the next 4 turns of Trick Room, and the next 3 turns of Dynamax, really, so that his Pokemon can then outspeed and clean up the game. And that's going to be very tough to do when staring down one of the scariest Dynamax Pokemon out there.
Right, and we kind of forget with how long the games go on that oftentimes a late game Dynamax sweep can be very, very impactful. But for now, it will just be a Protect out of Glastrier. And Haze from Dusclops, that is going to get rid of all stat changes on the field. That's huge, because now Metagross has lost its 2 defense boosts that would have been helpful against the Glastrier there, and now it's not going to have that option. So I like how this Dusclops is trained with the Haze as an option here.
I think the Haze was more for Incineroar, though, than Metagross, given at how low its health is already. I would assume that Incineroar with those defense boosts would have been a lot scarier for that Glastrier to look at, whereas Metagross getting some great damage down on that Dusclops, correctly predicting that the Glastrier protected, not going for damage that turn. But still, it's just a tough spot for everyone to be in. I like that Chris kept his Glastrier safe, most likely going for the Dynamax this turn, but at the same time, he's stalling out his own Trick Room, and Incineroar nor Metagross are going to be the Pokemon you want to Pain Split with at this point in time.
And there is the Dynamax out of Chris, so he is in desperation mode with these last couple of turns of Trick Room remaining. He needs to take advantage of these 3 turns of Dynamax. Of course, Glastrier, being the slowest Pokemon on the field, is going to be moving before Mitchell's Pokemon. It did get intimidated there with the Incineroar switch-in, but Pain Split on Incineroar is not going to help out Dusclops too much. It still does a little bit, because Dusclops' HP, the base HP is so low that even a little bit of HP difference is going to help. But Max Quake from Glastrier into Metagross will get the knockout and will give Chris the Chilling Neigh boost as well. So that means his next Max Quake, potentially onto Incineroar next turn, is going to do even more damage.
And Mitchell almost forced to switch out this Incineroar as well, so that way he can get that second Intimidate down and match these knockouts that the Glastrier is going to be finding. Again, a very rough spot for both of these trainers. We have to keep in mind that Trick Room is slowly counting down. Mitchell needs to find the opportunity to go, go for protects, go for switches, deny Glastrier those knockouts. Sending in Rillaboom here is smart because Rillaboom is his only remaining Pokemon that has access to protect, and that will buy him 1 turn. Grimmsnarl also not likely to get knocked out by a Max Quake, assuming that's what Glastrier targets that slot with. So finding time, but you have to keep looking for it. What a tough spot for both these trainers to be in. This is truly down to the wire.
Yeah, and I love how back and forth this set has been. It feels like both trainers have really shown off their skill and shown off the Oceania region, and how great that these trainers can perform at the highest level here in the Players' Cup. Incineroar will switch out though. Max Quake is the decision out of Glastrier into the Grimmsnarl slot. Of course, that was going for Incineroar there. I was wondering, do you go for Max Hailstorm because Incineroar can't be in the Rillaboom slot no matter what? So even if the Rillaboom switched out, you wouldn't have to worry about it. But instead he went for the Max Quake. Knock off onto Dusclops. It is not enough. It gets her to Eviolite, sure. Now it's going to take more damage. But this Dusclops will just not quit.
It won't, and this is why Dusclops is incredible. Such a bulky Pokemon. Eviolite boosting that bulk even further, taking advantage of Mitchell's own grassy terrain to slowly heal itself back up. As long as Dusclops can get 1 attack against this Rillaboom, it could even Pain Split to get its health even higher. Mitchell has to be very careful with this play.
Reflect going up yet again for the side of Mitchell. The Grassy Glide finally takes down the Dusclops. There will be no more help. It is Glastrier versus Mitchell's entire team. Max Hairstorm with a Chilling Neigh boost does connect on to the Rillaboom. The Reflect was set up there, but it still was not enough because of how strong Glastrier is. And that is another Chilling Neigh boost, which is going to negate the incoming Incineroar Intimidate, so that's good for him. But this is 2 versus 1 here in this spot. Glastrier is still really healthy, but Trick Room's eventually gonna end in this spot, and I know Mitchell can't do too much damage as Trick Room actually ends on that turn. So this is again really down to the wire.
It's down to the wire, and I don't think Mitchell can out damage this Glastrier. We just saw Trick Room end. Incineroar does have access to Fake Out as it is its first turn on the field, so you can start things off by going for, Fake Out Spirit Break, get some chip damage down. But then you're left in a really tough spot where it's, Flare Blitz plus Spirit Break maybe to find your knockout somehow. I don't think these Pokemon can necessarily do the damage required, barring something like a critical hit. And given this Protect from the Glastrier, that's just going to raise its health further, again, thanks to that grassy terrain.
Yeah, and Chris was pretty much forced that turn to Protect because you don't want to take free damage. You don't want to, even if Spirit Break is not doing a lot of damage on its own, you don't want to take Fake Out and Spirit Break for nothing. You pretty much guaranteed had to Protect there. So the situation is the same here. The difference, as we just saw Mitchell lock in, is Mitchell deciding that the Will-O-Wisp is a better plan against Glastrier because that is going to really hinder its attack stat. Does it connect? Yes, it does. Incineroar Will-O-Wisp onto the Glastrier. That's really going to hurt its offensive output here. Spirit Break from Grimmsnarl is not going to do too much damage there, but it is going to lower the special attack, which doesn't matter there. It's all up to what Glastrier can do. High horsepower with a burn into the Shuka on Incineroar. That did like 15 damage or something. I didn't even see how much that did. That was such insignificant damage put out from Chris, and that Will-O-Wisp was an awesome decision from Mitchell.
Yeah, and that Will-O-Wisp, and I think more importantly, knowing how much damage you were going to take from the burn from the Shuka weakened high horsepower onto your Incineroar is really sort of what you have to be thinking about in this situation, because Glastrier can get 1 knockout and then boost its attack and then most likely get the second knockout. So you have to time this in such a way that your Flare Blitz plus your Spirit Breaks are going to out damage the Glastrier. And, you know, Chris correctly going for another turn of Protect Stall to get that last, I believe, last turn of the Grassy Terrain health back. So it's all going to come down to how much damage does Flare Blitz do, and will 2 Spirit Breaks be enough to pick up that knockout? Because, yes, there are only 3 minutes remaining in this game, but only Chris has access to Protect. And as of right now, if this game were to end, Mitchell would be the winner because there are more Pokemon standing on his side of the field.
Yep, Grassy Terrain is gone. It's off the field, so no more passive recovery. You still have Hail for this upcoming turn, but it all comes down to Glastrier. What we saw at the end of Game 2, where no Pokemon were left, Glastrier knocks itself out from Life Orb. We could very well be in a similar scenario here. Spirit Break brings Glastrier down under half of its HP. It's up to the Flare Blitz on Incineroar. It is super effective. It's Incineroar's best attack. It's really its only attack in this spot. And it connects on to Glastrier. That will be enough to knock it out. And Mitchell Dix takes this set 2-1 and moves on to winners round 2. What